Hey guys, today we're heading somewhere a little dusty, a little divine, and just a tad full of thread. You find yourself stepping into the faded clay streets of ancient Lydia, where the sun hangs lazy over flat rooftops and olive trees whisper above open courtyards. The air smells faintly of warm wool and crushed figs, and somewhere off to your left, the rhythmic clack of a loom echoes like a heartbeat in the stillness. You're here for one woman, though she doesn't know she's about to become a legend. Arachne. No, not a goddess, not a queen, not even technically famous yet. She's immortal, just like you, except for one minor thing. She's really, really good at weaving. Like, Olympian level good. And that, as you're about to find out, is a bit of a problem. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And if you're joining me from somewhere far away, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, relax, maybe put on some soft music, and let's get started on today's journey together. You trudge along the packed dirt path, sandals kicking up lazy clouds of red dust. You pass a fig vendor dozing behind her stall, a goat stubbornly chewing a basket, and a bored teenager carving a little owl into the edge of a fountain. Then you hear it again. That clack clack clack, like a metronome for the gods. You follow it around the corner, and there, in the shade of a creaky wooden awning, sits Arachne. She's young, maybe 17, but her hands move like they've lived 1,000 winters. Her fingers blur as she guides threads through the loom, golden and crimson and seafoam green, and the image blooming on the cloth looks almost alive. You blink. Is that a horse galloping across the pattern? A dancing girl? A lion blinking in the sun? The villagers say her work is magic. Arachne, on the other hand, says it's just skill. No magic, no muse, no divine whisper from Olympus. And that's where the trouble starts. Because in ancient Greece, you can be good, even great, but if you claim you're better than the gods, well, you're practically writing your own tragic ending. People gather quietly, not just to admire, but to listen. She talks as she works, her voice sharp with pride. She says she taught herself. That no goddess ever guided her hands. That Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war, and weaving, couldn't do better if she tried. The crowd winces. You wince. Even the goat stops chewing for a second. But Arachne doesn't flinch. She wipes a strand of hair from her brow, dips her shuttle again, and starts weaving a new border, grapes curling into roses, a hunter taking aim, a nymph leaping into a stream. Her work is seamless, full of motion and life. You almost forget you're watching fabric. Now, you might be wondering, was weaving really that big a deal back then? Oh, absolutely. In a world without Instagram or ASMR videos, tapestries were high art. Storytelling, social commentary, and bragging rights all rolled into one. Athena herself was known not just as a war strategist but as the divine patron of craft and knowledge, especially weaving. If music belonged to Apollo, then thread belonged to her. And that makes Arachne's defiance, well, kind of spicy. Here's your mainstream historical fact: in many city-states, weaving was one of the few respected creative pursuits for women. It wasn't just homemaking. It was storytelling with thread. Tapestries often showed myths, battles, genealogies, even gossip disguised as heroism. But here's your quirky tidbit: there's some fringe speculation that skilled weavers like Arachne may have been thought to possess mantic abilities, hidden prophecy through patterns. Like, imagine reading your future in a cross-stitch. Still, The villagers don't debate that. They just murmur and exchange glances. No one says it aloud, but they all know the risk. You insult a mortal? You get side-eye. You insult a goddess? You might get turned into a shrub. Even so, Arachne keeps going. Every morning she threads her loom with silk from far-off lands, Phoenician purple, Egyptian linen, and spins stories in color. And every evening, a few more people linger longer than they should. Word travels, up mountains and across valleys. And eventually, as it always does in these stories, it reaches Olympus. Now, no one really agrees on how Athena hears. Some say it's a talking owl with loose lips. Others believe she sees the world in ripples of thread and one ripple just wouldn't sit still. But there's an open scholarly debate that Arachne's boldness wasn't just hearsay, it might have been embroidered into her work itself, with sneaky little jabs at the gods hidden in decorative borders. So imagine Athena now. Divine, eternal, intelligent, and very, very tired of mortal teenagers thinking they invented ambition. She doesn't rage. Not yet. Instead, she decides to visit. Not as a goddess, of course. That would be too easy. No, Athena prefers the slow reveal. She tucks her celestial robe into a drab old cloak, puts on the voice of a village elder, and descends in human form. A hunched woman, bent with time, eyes like sun-faded jade. And tomorrow morning, as you step out into the courtyard, that woman will be standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Watching. Listening. Measuring Arachne not by the softness of her thread, but by the arrogance in her tone. You sense it building, like thunder muffled by distance. The gods don't mind talent. They mind pride. Especially the kind that forgets where gifts come from or dares to suggest they weren't gifts at all. Still, Arachne works. She weaves Apollo with a lyre, Artemis chasing a deer, even Zeus, casually disguised as a swan. The crowd gasps at that one, and not just because of the stitching. You feel a chill in the late summer air. And behind you, the old woman coughs gently into her sleeve. You turn to look at her, the old woman who wasn't here yesterday. She stands a little apart from the rest of the villagers, wrapped in folds of faded gray, her eyes catching the sunlight in that strange way ancient things often do. There's no applause in her hands, no gasps from her mouth. Just a steady, curious gaze locked on Arachne's loom. And Arachne notices. Not in a fearful way, more like a performer spotting the one person in the audience who isn't clapping. She flicks a glance at the crone, then lifts her chin just slightly. Her shuttle keeps moving. She's not just weaving. She's testing something. The old woman finally speaks. Your hands are clever, child. But you might offer a prayer before you forget who wove the first thread. The loom goes quiet for half a heartbeat. You watch the tension shift. Arachne doesn't stop moving, but the rhythm stutters, just once. Then she says lightly, but with something iron underneath, my hands are my own. No goddess guided them. No god gave me this. The old woman's mouth twitches. Even the gods are owed respect. Not fear, perhaps, but humility. I will not give credit for what I learned through blood and blister, Arachne replies. If Athena wants to challenge me, she can try her hand at the loom. And that, as they say, is when the lightning hits the olive tree. The old woman lifts her chin, her form shifting, glowing. The cloak slips away like shed skin. Her wrinkles flatten, her bones rise, and her voice drops into something older than echo. In a moment that feels stretched across centuries, you're no longer looking at a crone. You're looking at Athena. The villagers fall to their knees. You probably should, too. But something pins you in place. It's not terror. It's awe. Athena stands there in full armor, cloak swirling behind her, face unreadable and perfect. She doesn't shout. She doesn't brandish a spear. She simply says, "Very well." Arachne doesn't kneel. Her hands shake barely, but she raises her chin. And Athena gestures. A second loom appears beside the first, born from light and air. No thread. No wood. Just divine energy shaped into form. The challenge begins. Now, this isn't some gentle arts and crafts competition. This is Olympian drama wrapped in wool. They both begin weaving, their hands moving fast enough to blur, the threads singing as they tighten, twist, cross. The air feels charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. You find yourself holding your breath. Athena weaves scenes of divine glory. You see them unfurl like visions, the Parthenon rising over Athens, the Gorgons falling under her gaze, the triumph of gods over monsters. The tapestry gleams with silver thread, colors so vivid they seem to pulse. Her work is flawless, divine in the truest sense. But Arachne, she chooses a different story. She weaves the sins of the gods. You gasp. The villagers gasp. Even the goat seems alarmed. In her tapestry, Zeus appears again not as a noble king, but as a trickster and seducer. He's there as the bull who carried Europa away, the golden rain that fell upon Danae. You see Poseidon cornering Medusa in Athena's own temple, Apollo chasing Daphne as she turns into a tree. The imagery is unmistakable. And it is beautiful. Every fold, every muscle, every tear and glimmer of deception, it's rendered with a precision that borders on cruel honesty. This isn't just weaving. This is accusation in color. And here's your mainstream historical fact: many Greek myths contain a darker undertone, especially those passed down through oral tradition. The gods weren't always benevolent. Their stories often reflected power imbalances, fears, and social commentary. We just tend to sanitize them with time. Now, for your quirky tidbit, there's some speculation among historians that this myth about Arachne was a kind of cautionary tale told to young apprentices in guilds, not just about pride, but about censorship. Weaving the wrong story could get you punished, divine or otherwise. Back in the courtyard, you feel the moment snap. The tapestries are done. Athena steps back, her face unreadable. Her own work is magnificent, of course. But even she cannot deny what hangs on Arachne's loom. It's perfect. Too perfect. And that's the problem. There's an open scholarly debate around what happens next, whether Athena is truly enraged by the disrespect, or whether she's simply heartbroken that a mortal dared to lay bare such uncomfortable truths, and did it with artistry no god could surpass. What's not up for debate is the result. Athena raises a hand. Just one. Arachne flinches, expecting a blow. But instead, her loom dissolves. The threads fall like ash. Then her arms begin to twist, narrow, elongate. Her fingers fuse, then split again, too many now, jointed in impossible ways. Her back curves, her skin hardens, her eyes grow 8 of them. You want to scream, but you can't. Because it's not grotesque. It's elegant. Terrible, yes. But elegant. Arachne falls from her stool, but doesn't hit the ground. Instead, she dangles, suspended from a single shining thread. Her body shudders once. Then she begins to spin. Athena's voice is soft now. Not angry. not triumphant. You will weave still, she says. But not as a woman. The villagers scatter. You stay, rooted in place, watching this new creature drift slowly upward into the shadows of the roof. Her silk gleams. Her legs move with the same graceful rhythm they always did. She's a spider now. The first of her kind. And whether this was a punishment, or a dark kind of mercy, or perhaps even a strange promotion, no one can quite agree. But you know this, Arachne will never stop weaving. And every spider you see since, that's her legacy. You return to the quiet village days later, though it feels more like centuries have passed. The streets are oddly hushed now. The looms still clack behind closed windows, but the laughter, the playful boasting, the chatter of apprentices, all that has thinned out like smoke. No one speaks her name. But her web remains, glistening in the rafters, untouched by broom or blade. No one dares. You feel it the moment you step beneath it. A kind of electric silence, like the air in a museum full of cursed artifacts. And high above, tucked in shadow, a faint twitch of 8 legs. Arachne, or what remains of her, is still working. Funny thing about legends. They ripple. You hear a lot of different versions after that. Some say Athena regretted what she did the moment Arachne changed form, that her anger wasn't truly rage but divine shame. Others whisper that the goddess took pity and transformed her so she could still create, just, differently. And then there are those who insist Athena wasn't even present. That this was just a story made up by bitter weavers to explain why talent alone is never enough. You duck your head and keep walking. The threads above you seem to sway as you pass. Here's a mainstream historical fact to ground your whirring thoughts. In ancient Greece, weaving wasn't just a chore, it was a symbol of feminine virtue, skill, and even wisdom. It wasn't just domestic labor. It was legacy. Penelope wove and unwove her tapestry to outwit suitors. The fates themselves wove destinies into being. Weaving was power. Quiet, thread-based power. But Arachne? She challenged the rules. Not just by competing with a goddess, but by choosing what stories got told. And that's where things get extra tangled. You find yourself wondering, was this myth a warning to keep your head down? Or was it an accidental blueprint for rebellion? That's where our fringe tidbit sneaks in. Some scholars believe the Arachne story wasn't about hubris at all. It was a coded critique of patriarchy, of divine injustice, of stories told only by the victors. In other words, Arachne didn't fall because she was arrogant. She fell because she was honest. Now you leave the village behind and follow the thread elsewhere, literally. Because spiders are everywhere. You wander into a rocky grove, then deeper into a cavern, and realize the myths didn't stop with Arachne. Across the Mediterranean, tiny echoes spun themselves into new stories. In Libya, there are folk tales of divine women who weave clouds into cloth. In Anatolia, ancient cults offered thread as tribute to underground deities. Even in Roman times, long after the Greek pantheon faded, the spider lingered as a creature both feared and revered. You touch the side of a stone, and your fingers come away sticky with silk. She's still here. Or her descendants are. And with that, a question unfurls in your mind like a fresh strand of thread. If Arachne lost her human form, does that mean she lost her soul? Her thoughts? Her memories? Or was she gifted a new kind of consciousness, one that sees the world in vibrations, not words? Open scholarly debate time. No one agrees on whether the transformation was symbolic or literal. Was Arachne turned into a spider as divine theater, a moral lesson wrapped in mythology? Or brace yourself, was this tale once rooted in an older animist tradition, where humans really did blur into animals, where souls migrated across species like water through cloth? You press forward and find the silk thread trails now patterned across cave walls, tree trunks, even bones. Not just ordinary webs. These ones tell stories. You swear it? A spiral that repeats like a labyrinth. A crisscrossing that looks eerily like a loom's warp and weft. And in the center of one particularly intricate web, the unmistakable shape of a woman's face. Brief. Faint. Almost impossible. But you saw it? Arachne hasn't stopped weaving. She's just using new materials. You start noticing spiders more often after that. Not just because you're looking for them, it's as if they're looking for you. A fat little jumper with brilliant green eyes perched on your sleeve. A delicate orb weaver tracing perfect circles in the corner of your room. One that lowers itself directly in front of your nose mid-yawn. You nearly choke on your tea. And each one weaves. Not chaotically, not at random. But with precision. Symmetry. Art. That's when you realize, the myth might not be just an origin story. It might be a reminder. Arachne didn't die. She adapted. And maybe that's the bigger lesson. You pause beneath an olive tree, its gnarled bark still scorched from some forgotten lightning bolt. Above you, a spider spins silver across the setting sun. Her body sways gently in the breeze. And for a moment, you could swear she's humming. Not with a voice. With motion. With memory. The web trembles with something unspoken. You step away carefully, trying not to disturb her work. Because here's the secret Athena never said out loud, no one can really stop a story once it's told. Arachne didn't just weave beauty. She wove truth. And even gods, it turns out, don't always like looking in the mirror. You keep moving, but the air has changed. It's thicker now, like the loom of the world is tightening around you. Every tree branch looks like a tangle of silk. Every bird call feels like a thread snapping somewhere far away. You don't know exactly where you're going, but you feel the pull, like a thread tugging at your wrist. So you follow. Up ahead is the temple. Not a grand marble one like Athena's, with fluted columns and polished bronze. This one's older, cracked and moss-laced, carved into a cliffside that forgets it ever had visitors. You step through what might have once been an archway, ducking low under dangling vines and the occasional very offended owl. The place smells of lichen, dust, and time. You're not the first to come here seeking answers. On the wall, a frieze half swallowed by ivy catches your eye. It shows a woman barefoot, hair wild, seated at a loom. Opposite her stands a figure unmistakably divine. The goddess leans in, finger pointed, mouth mid-curse. But it's the woman's eyes that freeze you. She isn't afraid. She isn't even angry. She's focused. You recognize that look. It's the look of someone who already knows they're going to lose, and still chooses to finish the work. Here's a solid historical fact to keep your feet on the floor. In ancient Greek culture, mortals were not supposed to challenge the gods. Hubris wasn't just arrogance, it was cosmic treason. Think of it like smacking the Wi-Fi router of Olympus. Bad idea. And yet, stories of mortals doing just that were everywhere. Why? Maybe because the Greeks weren't just obsessed with order, they were fascinated by what happened when someone broke it. Take Prometheus, for instance. Gave humans fire, got his liver eaten on repeat. Or Niobe, who bragged about her kids being better than Leto's. That one ended very badly. Arachne fits neatly into this rebellious family tree. A pattern of mortals getting too bold and paying the price. But, there's always a glitch in the pattern. You crouch beside a stone bench, half hoping for a spider to crawl up and offer you divine insight, half hoping it doesn't. Nothing happens. Except a breeze stirs a cobweb from the corner, lifting it gently, like it's waving hello. You smile. Here comes your fringe tidbit. There's a theory, mostly whispered, rarely written, that Arachne didn't just survive in spider form, she escaped. That her transformation wasn't a punishment, but an evolution. A loophole in divine logic. Because if you can't outtalk a goddess, maybe you can outweave her. Spin yourself into a new form. Vanish from the human world and live on in the corners. A quiet rebellion. One that still continues. You lean against a pillar and close your eyes. The temple hums softly, like it remembers stories even if no one's spoken them aloud in centuries. And slowly, a scene unfolds in your mind. You're in that final moment. The competition is over. Arachne stands beside her tapestry, hands shaking from effort, mouth dry from silence. Athena studies the work. Her own tapestry full of order, divine triumph, neat punishments for foolish mortals hangs across from Arachne's, brutal, raw, beautifully honest. Gods deceiving mortals. Zeus in all his less than honorable disguises. Power at its most human. The goddess sees it all. And she knows it's accurate. Too accurate. So maybe, just maybe, Athena's rage isn't the fiery thunderclap kind. It's cold. Quiet. The kind that burns beneath the skin and makes your spine stiffen. Maybe she doesn't shout. Maybe she says one word, enough. And then comes the transformation. Not explosive. No lightning bolts. Just a stillness. A rethreading of the body, molecule by molecule. A flicker. A change. And Arachne is gone. But not gone. You open your eyes, heart thudding like a loom in full swing. There's an open scholarly debate that never really got settled. Was Athena ever wrong? Ancient scholars avoided the question. Modern ones tiptoe around it. But lately, more voices have begun to say yes. She was flawed. Proud. Defensive. Maybe even jealous. Not of Arachne's skill, but of her freedom. Because Arachne didn't follow the rules of divinity. She told the truth, even when it hurt. And you think, maybe the gods aren't afraid of competition. Maybe they're afraid of critique. The sun has shifted. Long shadows creep across the temple floor. Time to leave. As you exit, you feel it again, that tug, that invisible thread loop through your chest. And as you walk, you notice something strange. You're not afraid. Not of curses. Not of stories. Not even of spiders. You pass a web strung across two olive branches, its strands catching the gold of twilight. The spider perched at the center pauses, legs twitching like fingers. She's listening. You smile again, softer this time. Because you understand something now. Arachne didn't lose. She wove herself out of the story they tried to trap her in. And now, she writes new ones. Quietly. Patiently. In corners and closets, libraries and attics. Every spiral of silk is a sentence. Every dew-speckled thread, a whisper of resistance. You tilt your head and whisper, "Thank you." There's no reply, but the web shivers in the breeze like laughter. The trail narrows now, thinning into a quiet path coiled with ivy and soft soil, as if you're walking not on ground but through the hem of someone's long-forgotten tapestry. You notice your footsteps hardly make a sound anymore. Even the birds have gone hush, like the world is holding its breath while you reach the end of this strange little myth. There's a clearing up ahead. Moonlight pools in it like milk, and in the center sits something oddly modern, a wooden stool, smooth and worn, and beside it, a frame with no tapestry inside. Empty. Waiting. You sit. Now that you've wandered through the myth, it's time to thread the pieces together. Not with answers, but with observations. Because that's what Arachne did, isn't it? She didn't invent anything new, she told the truth about what was already there. She looked at Olympus and said, "Hey, you're not perfect. Maybe someone should say it out loud." And instead of applause, she got turned into a spider. Here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor you again. In many versions of the myth, especially Ovid's in Metamorphoses, Arachne's tapestry is described as flawless. Not just skillful, but perfect. Not even Athena can find a single flaw in the weaving itself. Which means, brace for it, the goddess loses. The only way she can win is by flipping the board over and turning her opponent into an arachnid. The Greeks didn't need their myths to be fair. They needed them to be interesting. But maybe that's why the tale of Arachne lingers. Because, unlike other mortals who defied the gods and got obliterated, Arachne wasn't destroyed. She was changed. Which, if you think about it, is kind of how stories survive. They change form, cling to walls, pop up where they're not supposed to, and rebuild themselves thread by thread. Time for a fringe tidbit. There's a little-known medieval reinterpretation of Arachne's myth where she isn't punished at all. Instead, she becomes a revered spinner who teaches other women to weave. A kind of clandestine patron saint of artisans, hiding in plain sight, elevated by skill instead of shamed by it. The church didn't love this version. Of course it left out the whole divine wrath part, but it survived. Barely. In footnotes and fragments. You stare at the empty frame beside you. Your fingers twitch, half expecting thread to appear between them. Maybe you'd weave your own version, if you could. What would you show? A world where questions are allowed. Where the gods aren't just untouchable forces, but flawed figures open to criticism. There's an open scholarly debate that's gotten louder in recent years. Was Arachne's punishment a feminist warning or a feminist survival tale? Was she a cautionary figure, know your place, ladies, or an icon of resistance, weaving truth when no one else dared? Depends who you ask. Some argue she symbolizes the dangers of pride. Others say she's the blueprint of brave dissent. But you're not in the mood for lectures. You're sitting in moonlight, listening to the wind tug gently at the leaves like fingers plucking a harp. The story doesn't feel like it's scolding you. It feels like it's inviting you in. You glance up. Just above the trees, a web glistens like a chandelier. And in the middle, of course, is a spider. She's tiny, not grand, or monstrous. No glowing eyes or thunderclouds. Just, delicate. Moving slowly. Spinning something you can't quite see yet. And suddenly, you understand something deeper. Maybe the gods won't ever say, sorry. Maybe myths don't always give justice. But Arachne? She left something better than vengeance. She left a method. A practice. A verb. To weave. To take threads of the old and twist them into something that speaks now. To trace patterns others ignore. To use silence, tension, and repetition until a message emerges. Maybe not loudly, but unmistakably. And you, sitting here in this strange little clearing, realize you've been weaving this whole time. Not with thread, but with thought. With wonder. With that quiet, rebellious question, what if there's more to this story? And if there's more to this one, there's probably more to all of them. So you rise from the stool, brushing leaves from your lap. The clearing doesn't vanish. It doesn't shimmer away. It just waits. Like a page half turned. The spider continues her work above, undisturbed. You step back onto the path, and this time, it's not the thread that leads you. It's the weaving. The forest breathes behind you now, slow and gentle, like it's finally settling down to sleep. You walk quietly, not out of fear, but out of reverence, like you've just walked through someone else's dream, and you're trying not to wake them. The stars blink softly above, their light woven into the sky like pinpricks through dark velvet. Each step you take feels lighter, as though the story itself has loosened its grip on your shoulders. You're not carrying it anymore. You're part of it. And the air tastes different now, calmer, like a sigh after a long, whispered tale. In the distance, you hear the faint sound of something small clicking, not ominous, not dangerous. Just delicate. A loom. A spinning wheel? Or maybe just a spider, finishing her last thread for the night. You've seen things you weren't supposed to. Heard truths that usually hide in the shadows of legends. But instead of being scared, you feel strangely peaceful. Like knowing the truth is less frightening than pretending you don't. So let your breath slow down now. Let your eyes grow heavier. You're safe, right here, in the lull between myth and meaning. The gods are watching, but so is Arachne, and she's not judging. She's weaving. And with that last thought, the world quiets, like a final stitch pulled snug. End story here. Sweet dreams.